You are listening to a Pod Bros exclusive.
Hey guys, we are live and back with a brand new episode of Take Aim Outdoors, and super excited to do today's show because one of my good buddies reached out to me, heard the Ivan Carter show, said he liked it, loved it, and Bryan was actually a guest. Bryan's from Lost Arrow Films, and Bryan loves to go by the call name of Matthew Broderick, so he's been in some big movies. So, Bryan, what's up, man? I'm glad you reached out to me and wanted to come back on Take Aim Outdoors.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. I just really enjoyed your podcast with Ivan, and it really hit home. A lot of the things he was, really expanding on, we got to experience firsthand, in our trips over there. So it just really resonated with me.
Bryan, when did you head over there, and can you elaborate a little bit, exactly details where you were, and we'll get into what you've seen, obviously, and what we can communicate through Ivan and what you saw.
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I went to Africa, both times I've been there twice. I've gone to South Africa both times, just because of more of a safety kind of issue. Me being kind of a chicken when it comes to protecting myself and wanting to get home to my family, and South Africa has, probably the best reputation as far as destination when you get over there and, on that continent. But, I went the first time in 2004, I believe, and it was just happenstance. I had an uncle that wanted to go, didn't really know where to start, and he just said, hey, man, if you'll put this together for me and my son, I'll cover your costs to get over there and all that, and just, really you just have to pay for your hunt. And so I took advantage of that, and I'll be honest with you, I never really had a big desire to go to Africa based on what I had seen on television, which was my only exposure to it, and it just didn't seem like, I don't know, it just didn't seem like that big of a challenge when you see kind of how it's portrayed on television. And, man, it's just totally different, Brandon. It's really life-changing. So, that opportunity was kind of just dropped in my lap, and I went, and we spent 2 weeks over there the first time, and just, man, it once it gets in your blood, it's tough to shake. And so, as you know, back in 2013, I was involved in an accident where I got crushed, and my partner and I, we usually spend quite a bit of time out west every year in September, and so we weren't going to be able to do that, and he had really been wanting to go back over to the place where I'd gone and take our longbows and try to do some hunting there. And so it was something that I felt like I could physically do. It happened to be my 40th birthday, so got the blessing from my wonderful wife to do it. And so we did a last-minute trip and put it all together. And about 30 days after I started walking again, I was on a plane headed back to Africa. So anyway, that's kind of how I got over there both times. And it's really not something that you can really envision how the experience is going to be until you actually do it,
Absolutely. Now, I know that, and too, Bryan, that TV sort of, not just Africa, but the hunting networks, they dummy down hunting because their main objective is 20 minutes, try to fit all this in. So a lot of stuff isn't fast-forwarded or dummied down, I'll say. So explain that a little bit, Bryan, because you mentioned that the hunt was totally different than what you thought it would be.
Yeah, and I understand that these guys basically have 20 minutes of footage to create a story, in a 30-minute slot. So you don't really see, the peripheral experiences that go along aside from just the hunt, the shot, and a lot of it is sitting in water holes. And then the other thing that, the Africa on television that sticks out in my mind is the older guys with the safari hats on and the vests with the patches all over it, carrying small cannons, $40,000 custom side-by-side guns, and walking behind 7 people with sticks, shooting animals. So, that's the picture I always had. And so the guy that I originally talked to about going was a friend that I acquired through fly fishing. And this gentleman, his name is Paul Brunner, and Paul is one of the forefathers of modern bow hunting. I mean, this guy did it all. He did some of the very first bow hunting films or VHS tapes, back in the 70s and 80s, like bow hunting October whitetails and stuff like that. And I mean, this guy was just a pioneer, and he was a traditional guy. And so he always said, man, if you ever want to go, I've got the spot. I've been going over there since the 70s, and they're really dialed into bow hunters. And so that's kind of where we went the first time, and it was a totally different experience than anything I could imagine. It's such a game-rich environment. You see so many animals. It's a lot of open country, so you see a lot. But when it comes down to actually getting a good shot on a mature animal, it is way, way, way harder than it's portrayed on television. It's just like anywhere else you hunt. You're going to see a lot of young age class deer, animals, not deer, young age class animals, and they're going to give you a lot of opportunities. But the mature age class animals are just like, a mature elk or a mature whitetail or anything else. They're tough, they're nocturnal, they're using all their senses, and dang, man, I mean, there's stuff over there trying to eat them for a living. So, they're on red alert all the time when the sun's shining. So trying to do it with a traditional bow, man, it's way more challenging than you would possibly imagine,
So I could believe it. I totally relate to what you're saying, and I think that's another thing, Bryan, that in film and TV, they don't even explain that very well, that constantly, and we covered that a little bit in the Ivan Carter episode, that there's always something trying to eat something in that food chain, constantly. So imagine that kind of pressure, to live. They live like that every day. So like you're getting at, basically, it's definitely not their first rodeo to see a group of guys going through the Great Plains.
No. And I'll tell you, this is what really spoke to me more than anything. It's not just the animals that are surviving this harsh environment over there. The people are in the same boat. I mean, and it doesn't matter the color. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the black Africans or the white Africans. They're all in the same boat together. They all are battling insurmountable odds just about all the time. And that's really what captured me about Africa, is this struggle for life that was so parallel between man and the wildlife. I mean, they both are experiencing the same types of trials just to survive. And so when I heard Ivan's interview with you, it was refreshing to hear someone that could articulate things that I saw and felt that resonated with me so well as he did. I mean, he's such an articulate guy, and you can tell. I mean, he's passionate about where he lives and what he's doing and the people and the wildlife, and he's made his life out of this. And so, from a layman's perspective like me, I can give you a bird's eye accounting of, or a firsthand accounting of exactly what he was talking about. And some of the questions that you asked him about, does the bushmeat trade and the rhino horn trade happen at different areas or coincide, and he answered it greatly. I can tell you that on both trips over there, we experienced very high poaching activity on the properties of the gentleman we were hunting with. And keep in mind, these properties are hundreds of thousands of acres. They measure in hectares, which is like a hectare is 2.5 acres. Well, they may have 100,000 hectares. Well, heck, that might be 250,000 acres. And they have multiple properties like this, and there's no shortage of land there. So, they're battling poaching full time. They have full time staff. That's all they're doing is battling poaching, and then they've got to make sure that the staff is not in on. So, just this last trip we were there. The second day we were in camp, some guys came boiling into camp midday, and you could tell something was wrong. And they had I think they had 5 rhinos on one of these properties, and I mean, they guard these animals with their lives, seriously, literally. And one of the rangers on his property had found a dead rhino with the horns cut off that had just been poached, and they knew the guys were still on the property. There was no way they could have gotten off the property that fast because they came in on foot, 15, 20 miles on foot, and they're packing these horns out that far on their back. So, our hunt kind of got pushed to the side, and it became a manhunt, and they were looking for these guys, and they never caught them. But they tracked these poachers about 15 or 16 miles and followed them until they found where they'd gotten in their vehicle. And these guys basically had sprinted from the time they killed the rhino to their vehicle, with this rhino horn on their back. So that was a very eye-opening experience. And then I would say 2 or 3 nights later, while we were eating, some of these same guys came in, and they had found a section of the property that had a fence that divided the game ranch from a village, and they were patrolling that fence, and there were multiple warthogs that had been snared by poaching snares that were hung. And so we actually begged them to go with them, and they let us go with them, and we actually got to go, catch the warthogs, and we filmed it. I mean, my guys were filming me grabbing them, and we were catching the warthogs and taking wire cutters and cutting the snares loose and releasing them, and that went on until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. These guys have to do this every day of the year, constantly. That's all they do is battle, So anyway, it just, we've got it so good over here, man. We just don't even know.
I agree. It makes you really. It's even conceited to say how well we have it. You know what I mean? To think of that struggle constantly. Not just the work they live in, but the life they have, the places they live, what they call home. I mean, the way you said it is perfect, Bryan. It's a struggle, and I just admire those people for their strength. It's just insane to me.
Well, when we went over this second time, the first time I was there, I had visited one of the local villages where a lot of the people work for the property we hunt. And I went to the school, and my mother has been a lifetime educator and devoted her life to education. And upon visiting that school, I mean, it literally broke my heart. I just could not believe what I was seeing. And so when we went back, I brought basically 2 giant tubs, big plastic tubs of school supplies, paper and pencils and markers and crayons and folders, anything I could think of. And I'll tell you, I'll give you a good example of how Africa works. When I got to the airport in Mobile, Alabama, and they were checking my luggage in, I knew I was going to have to pay for that extra weight and the extra luggage, excessive baggage fees. And I told them what was in there, and they looked at it, and they said, you know what? We're not going to charge you for this. And so Delta, gave me a pass on which would have cost me $300 or $400 in weight and overcharge fees for all the stuff we took. They didn't charge me a dime because I told them what we were doing with this equipment, these supplies. When we get to Africa, that's a different story. They're wanting to know what's in the bag, wanting to charge me taxes and tariffs and all this stuff, when I get to the airport in Africa for bringing all these supplies in. And so I'm in their country bringing school supplies to their children, and they were trying to extract money from me to bring it in. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm about as easygoing as it gets. But when it comes to bureaucracy and it comes to corruption or just not doing the right thing, I lose it. And it got pretty sketchy in that airport for a while. And we were in the security office there in the customs office. So anyway, I won't say how it all worked out, but it worked out, and we got the stuff out of there, and we took it to the schools, and it made us feel really good because, for instance, the top tracker at one of these places, which the tracker is way high up in their community, the top tracker, which would be one of the highest paid guys out of that village, he makes the equivalent of about $1,200 US a year. That's what he lives on. So when you have a person like that, that's the high end of the pay scale, and there's people that are making half that or less than that. I mean, how do you judge them from our perspective when there's a $50,000 to $75,000 rhino horn standing in front of them? I mean,
good question. Yeah, good. It's a great question, and just let me rewind 1 second, Bryan. I know you're not going to say how, but what was your feelings like in that security office? I mean, were you nervous, like, what the heck am I into? Were you scared for your life or just uneasy about the situation?
Oh, no, not at all, not at all. I learned on my first trip. My uncle and my cousin that we went on the first trip together, they took rifles, and I handled all the export permits from the States to get the rifles into South Africa. And then when we got there, it became an extraction process. I've got a lot of tips on how to, if you ever want to go to Africa and take firearms or not, or travel, I can tell you from experience, and that'll be a whole nother discussion, but how to do it and not get skin up, but no, after the first trip, I realized that what the game is, and so on that second trip, when we're in there trying to get all this stuff through, and they're giving me all their BS, I wasn't buying it. I wasn't ever afraid. I wasn't, afraid of being arrested or whatever. I just knew what the game was, and that if I didn't stand my ground, they'd end up getting as much as they could out of me. And I'll tell you, here's one thing I'll hit on before we go back to that. when you get off the plane and when you step through into the baggage area after you've gone through customs and immigration, there are swarms of people that have no source of income, no means of income, and they are preying on you. They see you, you're a white hunter, they can see you coming a mile away. They watch you, they're watching you get your bags, they're immediately swarming you, trying to be your buddy and help you take your bags. And it is a shell game like you have never seen. There'll be 15 or 20 of them. If they get you out the door and tell you they're going to take you to your hotel or to a cab, if you make it to the cab or you make it to your hotel without 4 of them distracting you and 1 of them taking off with a camera bag, it's a miracle. So, you know, if you don't know who to call and who to help you, you're going to be in trouble. So what we do is we've found a company that has people that are waiting on you, and they have big bright vests where you can see them. And you go to those people, and they get your baggage, they get you where you need to be, and they keep you from getting skin up too bad. And it costs about $200 round trip, and it's the best money you'll ever spend. Because if one of those cats goes running off with a, $5,000 camera bag, you'd be wishing you spent that $200 for that, for that service.
How confusing, though. So, I mean, it just sounds like it's craziness.
Man, it is such a circus environment over there. The first year I went, I tried to travel a little bit in the city of Johannesburg. That was foolishness on my part. And so, I would have loved to spend some time in that city and done a little bit of exploring. But, I learned that the easiest thing to do is you're going there to hunt. You need to keep it in perspective because Africa will drive you insane if you worry about every little detail. So you just need to get to the airport, get to the closest hotel to the airport. If there's one across the street or attached to it, that's where you want to be. And then you want to go straight back to whatever connecting flight or road transportation that you're going to, have, and get to those hunting properties as fast as you can. And, unless you're with some type of service, like a tourist group or a service, you don't want to be doing it on your own. And again, I'm a Southern boy. I'm probably culturally challenged. And I'm just wrestling out of my weight class when I'm trying to deal with those guys over there. They're way too slick for me. But anyway, I mean, they're all in the same boat, Brandon. I mean, you figure these guys are living on, what the average person in the States makes in a week. They're living on that annually. So
yeah.
when there's a an animal out there that has a horn on it that could be worth $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 to them, I mean, what do you expect them to do?
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking, that's for sure. And I didn't get to ask this to Ivan, and I don't know if you had experience with this, Bryan. Where did your PH or guide, where did he tell you these guys come from? Are they just from local communities that get the word to poach and you're going to make some money? I mean, did they ever explain that to you?
They did, and no, they're not just local. Some are local, some are not. The whole system is so corrupt over there, as it has been explained to me. I do not have firsthand knowledge like Ivan does, but I can tell you that how it was explained to me is that, the government is very involved in these wildlife properties and these wildlife management programs that these wildlife, safari guys have going on over there. So they know your population. You have to, they know how many, you have to buy your certain tags from them for every species. And if you have rhinos, those rhinos are registered. I mean, they know every animal you have when it comes to those type animals. So somehow or another, this information gets out to the guys that poach them for a living, and so they know where the rhinos are. I mean, they know what landowner is trying to support and maintain 4 or 5 rhinos like my friend. So, I mean, basically the government information is providing them the roadmap on how to get to them and get out. And then they do their due diligence, and they do their scouting, and they figure out how to get in and get out. And I mean, these guys may live on this property for 4, 5, 6, 7 days living on nothing, literally nothing, and sleeping on the ground, trying to cross a track on these rhinos. And once they find them, they've got them. I mean, it's not too terribly difficult once they find them to kill one of them or more, because if there's 3 or 4 of them there and there's 3 or 4 rhinos, believe me, they're not just going to shoot one and leave. They're going to get them all. They're going to wipe them out right there. They're going to cut those horns off, and they're going to haul butt. And but the problem is, to me, the problem is not with these guys that are poaching bush meat to eat or to sell. It's the same thing. Or are poaching these rhinos for their horns. To me, it's the market. I mean, you're never going to stop people in poverty from trying to eat and trying to feed their families. So you've got to go to the other end of the spectrum and figure out, how do you stop the market? How do you make it illegal for people to even buy the rhino horns, have them, sell them in Asia or wherever they use them? I mean, that's where you've got to, I think, fight the war from a more sophisticated stance. On that end, on the the receiving end, not the poaching end. Because let me tell you, if that rhino horn's worth nothing, you'll never see another rhino killed forever.
Yeah, I agree, and much like Ivan said, it's education. So once we get to that point, and I don't know if you caught this, I guess he's going to Asia in April to educate younger people. So hopefully, the next 10, 20, 30 years, that education gets out that, there's nothing mythical about what's in that horn. There's nothing going to, give you special powers, make you, a superhero. That, like you said, that value of that trade will decease. And, hopefully, as a whole, hopefully, and, I know you feel the same way, Brian, hopefully it saves the rhino species.
Yeah, I mean, man, I just absolutely love wildlife, and when we were when our Lost Arrow Africa film aired, I got an email from a guy, and it said, "In your film, I watched you shoot, you and your partner. I watched you shoot 2 warthogs with your bow. And then part of the film, I watched you release a warthog from a snare and release it. And I don't understand why you think, that is ethical, or you're a conservationist, by releasing the animal and then going and shooting 2. And that's something that we're never going to be able to explain to them. If they don't have that love for wildlife and nature like we do as hunters, as most hunters do, they're never going to understand that, and so, let me tell you, there's not any Africans grinding up rhino horns and drinking it, snorting it, or whatever the heck it is they do it. They're not doing it. The problem's not in Africa. So somehow or another, you've got to figure out, how to get across with these guys. So anyway, what Africa did for me, Brandon, is it put my life in perspective. it put everything, every blessing that I have every day, it put it in perspective, and it made me really appreciate everything that I have and everything that my family has, my children, my wife. We are afforded such amazing opportunities, and it's really not that hard in our country to enjoy a great quality of life. You don't have to be a rocket scientist, and you don't really have to, hard work pays off, but, you don't have to kill yourself working to death and have a good, comfortable life. Where these people over there, they don't have a concept of what we live. And so, I love going there for perspective, and I love going there and experiencing the conflict between man and nature, and to me, that struggle is so important on a global scale. If you think we're conservationists here, go spend 2 weeks with a guy that owns a piece of property in South Africa that is managing it for wildlife and pouring every dime he has into it to manage this wildlife herd. And he's doing it at his own risk, because at any second, the government can come in and say, we are nationalizing your property. We're going to pay you $1 an acre for it, if that, 50 cents an acre or whatever. There's nothing you can do about it. Pack your crap and get out of here. And it's happening. It happens every day there. It happened in Zimbabwe. And if you ever want to know about what can happen in Africa, read the history about Rhodesia to Zimbabwe transition in the war that took place there, and the nationalizing of land. It happens. We had a gentleman that came and had dinner with us one night from Zimbabwe. 4 generations there, Rhodesians, then Zimbabwe, returned to Zimbabwe. But the piece of property that was in his family for 4 generations, when the government was overthrown, they came in and murdered part of his family in front of him, and basically kicked him off the property that's been in his family for 200 years. And he was homeless overnight. So, and that's what can happen to these guys there at any time. But they still pour their heart and soul into managing that wildlife. So they're on a different level, buddy.
They are. Just the whole culture. Everything is a different level. It's so hard to wrap your mind around, and it's neat to get that kind of insight. And I know that, like you said, Bryan, it gives you just a lot of perspective on life, and I'm sure ultimately it changes the way you look at stuff, right? And it gives you so much value.
It does. There's no question about it. So anyway, I think you having Ivan on was going to be something that you're going to look back in your life and be really proud of having that conversation with him on this type of platform. And ever how small, that was going to be, a part in furthering the cause to get things going the right direction over there.
I hope so, and sounded like that was a compliment, Bryan. So I'm going to say thank you very much for that, because that was the goal, and I'm glad to see that.
It was meant to be. I may not have got it very good that way, but yes, for sure.
No, I'm teasing you, but I know it was, and I know that that's what I wanted to get across. And even if it's 2 people, that's the goal, is to reach somebody, and I hope we did. And it's all about educating and knowing, and if you don't know, you can never fix anything. So
that's correct.
Yeah. So on the flip side of stuff, Bryan, I wanted to talk about the do-it-yourself elk hunt, but I'm going to save that, if you don't mind, Bryan. We're going to do that on we'll do part 2 episode of this at a different time, maybe next week if you're free. But
Yeah.
I would like to just give you the, opportunity and the platform. What's going on real quick with Lost Arrow, and what films you guys got planned for this year?
Well, we got a lot of really cool stuff on film this year, and we're going to submit some films to some of the tours again, hunting film tour, and I think the piece that I'm really excited about maybe the most is we're doing a piece that's kind of in our backyard. I'm from Alabama, and Scott, my partner, is from Florida, and that's where we spend the most of our time, outdoors and hunting, and so we've really done a really cool piece on hunting in Alabama in the South and hunting down in Florida, which people just don't see a lot of. You don't see a lot of hunting in the South on television or on film. It's not that great draw or grandioso style hunt like a elk hunt out west is, or a big whitetail hunt in the Midwest. But that's what we're working on, and it's focused on traditional hunting and why we've chosen to use traditional tackle, and really kind of shows who we are and what we do and how we manage our property and the hard work we put into it. And I know it's not on any kind of scale that some of the guys in the Midwest are doing, because I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, that. But we're harvesting 140 to 150 inch deer in Alabama, with archery equipment. This isn't any high fence stuff. These are small pieces of property, big groups of landowners, that are working together to manage their property, and that's pretty good deer for our country, and Scott down in Florida, he's growing 130 inch deer in South Florida. So, it's that's what we're working on. That's what we're excited about showing this year, and I think it's really going to resonate with people, and there'll definitely be a lot of action. I promise you that, because we got a lot of targets down here.
I know that 150 is nothing to shake a stick at, and that's a deer I will gladly shoot in Illinois, to Kansas, and that's unreal to have that in Alabama. So I just want to get that point across to listeners. If you're not familiar with the South, those are crazy big deer. So that's a huge deer for what you guys got going on there, and that speaks volumes about how hard you guys must work on property management. So good job to you guys, Bryan. But I look forward to seeing that for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Bryan, I just want to say thanks for your insight and your perspective on Africa, and I think it's going to be a great show for the listeners. And let everybody know where we can find Bryan Broderick on Instagram, which I know that we've talked about that a little bit, and Bryan's going to step that game up here pretty shortly.
Man, what I need to do is get you to do it for me.
Exactly.
I tell you, man, I am terrible with social media. I'm just terrible. And we're Lost Arrow Films. We've got a Facebook page, an Instagram page. We're on Vimeo. We've got our films on Vimeo. And, I've had so many people tell me, why are you not on YouTube? I don't know. I don't know why we're not on YouTube. But you know this, Brandon. We're not doing this as a business. We're not out here trying to get sponsors and make money. And this is a passion project for Scott and I. And, I am definitely derelict in my duties as far as getting awareness for what we're doing and being out there socially. But I'm working on it. I'm going to get better. But it's not going to happen overnight.
I promise.
Heck, man, 6 months ago, I didn't even know what a podcast was. So that shows you what a caveman I am.
Yeah, now you listen to several, don't you?
Yeah, I haven't listened to a song on the radio since you and I did a podcast 6 months ago, or maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I have hundreds of podcasts downloaded about any type of subject, and that's all I listen to all day. And my two boys, when they get in the truck, they just go, "Oh, Dad, turn the radio on." Like, no, they're talking about spotting scopes. I've got to get dialed in on. I need a new spotting scope. So anyway,
it's a crazy platform that you get to learn something, right? You know, it really is.
You created a monster, Brandon.
It's too funny. Well, I'm glad to be a part of that.
Yeah. All right, man.
But Bryan, thanks so much, and I know that we will, like I said, we'll touch base next week. We'll do a rundown on do-it-yourself elk hunt. And I appreciate your time so much today, Bryan. And boys and girls, as you know, every Tuesday, podbros.com, outdoorpodcastchannel.com, live on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn. And make sure to leave us a review. Take Aim Outdoors. Really appreciate that. And it helps the show go on and spread to others. So it's a big deal. And just take 30 seconds. And please do that for us. But that's it. We'll see you guys next week.